Hello and welcome to episode 323 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. My name is Mark. I am the green tank. I would mention my other tanks, but I'm in the spotlight on this one. We don't need them here because this is a Mark-centric episode, finally. I know people have been calling out for this for years, for over 4 or 5 years, as long as we've been doing the show. Please, can we just have a Mark episode? Well, you're going to get pretty much a Mark episode here because we're going to be doing my top 50 games of all time. Not the entire list, but you're going to get the first bit of it, games 50 to 31. I'll be going over my top games of all time, numbers 50 to 31, while fending off pot shots, I'm sure, by my co-host, Kellen the Red Tank.
No.
And Neil in the Orange Tank.
We love you. What are you talking about? We love all the games you like.
We'll see.
Trains.
Listener, remember he said that here.
Can't wait to see how many
figures.
train and World War games are on your list, Mark.
Well, let's get right into it. Game number 50, All Quiet on the Western Front, Germany 1942 to Germany 19...
There's not enough country for this old man.
That's right. That's right.
I watched that with my dad over Thanksgiving, by the way. Have you seen
like
it?
it?
You've seen it, Mark.
No Country for Old Men?
Yeah. Yeah,
No
he
Country for
liked
Old Men?
it. It was like
a movie he would like.
The girls went to Wicked and he categorically refused to go. And I said, we're having man movie night. And he is like totally like there can't be any nudity or F-bombs. But like the amount of violence in No Country for Old, it was absolutely out of this world.
The final scene of that movie is probably one of my top 5 favorite scenes of all time.
That was excellent.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into my top 50, I guess. So number 50, this is down a spot, and I think it's actually hanging on by a thread. This is going to fall into one of the buckets of games on my list, which is aspirational. This is there just aspirationally, but I've got to get it played because I didn't play it this year because it is a big game. This is Cthulhu Wars. This is dropped year after year, I think, for me, just because I don't get it played as much as I'd like to.
What the hell, man? It's a dropper?
I know.
I was about ready to
like
make fun of you like this was some like prom dress in your closet that you wanted to wear again, but this is Cthulhu Wars we're talking about here.
Yeah, I know. This used to be like a stalwart in the top, 25. I don't know where it was originally, but I know it's hit some heights on my list, but it is dropping, unfortunately.
It's funny, not to like spoil anything, but this is definitely a note that you're going to be seeing a lot of in my top 50 as well, is just things falling a big way because I haven't played them in a long time. It just feels weird to like continue to float things. Even though I know I love them, it's like they have to sink unless I get a chance to play them. And like, Cthulhu Wars, is going to fall on my list, but I am still surprised to see this at number 50 on yours. That's a big fall.
That's lower than you expected. Yeah. I just need to get it played. I feel like I played it. I'd have to look, but I feel like I played it maybe just a little over a year ago. And I think that last game wasn't the greatest game that I played of it. And so combining that with with the length of time. Yeah, almost certainly. Okay. Number 49. This is also a little aspirational. This is like, in a lot of ways, similar to Cthulhu Wars. I haven't played in a while, but much, much shorter game. In a lot of ways, the way I like to play it is not even as a game or as an activity. This is down 2 spots, Ricochet Robots.
Not a game.
Ricochet Robots. It is certainly a game. It is more a game than some other games that might appear on my list. Much higher on my list, in fact, too. But this is certainly a game. There is scoring, and it is competitive. It's not like I'll just do it for fun. Although I've said in the past that my favorite way to play this is, I've mentioned this before, I've taken it to non-gaming parties at all and had it out there because I knew there were a couple people there who were board gamers and might be interested in playing it. And then all of a sudden we have a crowd of people around the table just trying to figure out how to get those robots around to their destinations. I feel like I should sort of treat this game like my crokinole. Like I should just set it up on a table. It should be like a centerpiece.
Did every day a new puzzle?
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, it's funny because I took your advice about the party thing and a little bit, and I started doing it at work. And this was for a little small period of time last year where I would just have it set up every day on my desk and tell people to come by and try to solve it. And like I had a little box people could put their solutions in, and then like but like I did that for about a week, and then I stopped doing it. And then kind of every time I think about Ricochet Robots, I'm like reminded that I should go back to doing that because I think people enjoyed it.
Okay, people did enjoy it.
Well, I mean,
like your kind of thing, right?
It's a video game studio, so there are always going to be people that are like, look.
You're like the donut guy at your office who always has donuts on Thursdays. It's weird. People stop by your desk.
That's the best.
No,
it's no weird.
People don't like you. People don't like the donut guy. They like the donuts.
Oh, that's wrong. No.
Oh yeah, so people don't like me, but they like submitting their puzzle solutions to Ricochet Robots.
Yeah,
Is that what you're trying to
exactly.
say? Okay.
Donut Guy is the glue of the office. I haven't worked in an office in a while, but I remember Donut Guy being the glue. Bagel Guy, in my case, was the glue of the office for sure. Okay, number 48 is new to the list, although not quite really actually new. This is making its comeback after years, but this is going to fall into another bucket of games that you're going to see maybe appearing on this list pretty often, which is Saved by BGA. So these are games where I either sort of liked them or maybe really liked them. In this case, I really like this game, but then it dropped, and being able to play it regularly on BGA has really, really allowed it to rise in my estimation. And this is the return of my namesake, Marco Polo. Voyages of Marco Polo, back on the list. I've also talked about how Marco Polo 2, it being so middling for me, for whatever reason, dragged down the original Marco Polo. I have now played Marco Polo and Marco Polo 2 on BGA a number of times, and both games have risen in my estimation a little bit. I still feel like Marco Polo 2 is basically just like a high-end regular Euro. But Marco Polo, the original Marco Polo, reclaimed that original love for it, where I was like, wow, this game is, the asymmetric powers being so weird and the crazy tightness of the game have reemerged as really, really interesting and different than other Euros. And so Marco Polo, because of the chance to play it more often on BGA, is back on the list. It's number 48.
I think what's interesting is I wouldn't necessarily say I had the opposite experience, but I've certainly played a lot more Marco Polo on BGA than in real life. And it's not that it like sort of made me think less of the game or anything like that, but I think it kind of just felt like, okay, it now occupies a space in my brain that is just, okay, that's a game that I enjoy playing on BGA, but it no longer feels exceptional to me. And I think partly because of just being amidst all the other games I could be playing on BGA instead, I suppose, is maybe one way to look at it. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've had my fill of Marco Polo, and I got that confirmation through it coming to BGA.
I culled this like within the last week, so super timely. I just am not playing it though, so I don't think it has anything to do with the quality of it. Christina like encouraged me to buy it, and I think we played it once, and then I was just like, do I really want to do this? Like, and it's like, how many midweight Euros? There's different eras of your life. Like, how many midweight Euros am I playing right now? Is it an all-time low, I would say. And so this one, I'm just like, I don't need 6 of these. And so Marco Polo got the cut. Do you have Marco Polo 1 and 2 at home?
I definitely have 1. I don't know if I have 2. I probably don't have 2 because I still, even though, again, I've liked it more playing it on BGA, Marco Polo 2 definitely feels like midweight Euro to me. It feels like, again, higher end, but just regular midweight Euro, whereas Marco Polo feels like something different. Like, I would hold on to it just because for me it feels like something a little fresher than a regular Euro. And maybe part of the reason why it's back on the list is because it had just, in my mind, been dragged down so much that in playing it again, I had such a low bar of expectation that it was able to exceed that. So we'll see. My number 47 is new to the list because while I was a fan of the original, I had never played Reiner Knizia's new take on Quo Vadis. So this is Zoo Vadis. I finally got a chance to play it this year. And yeah, very, very much enjoyed it. Again, the Knizia stripped down rules was so refreshing. You see a Knizia game with like a lot of bling, as Zoo Vadis is very, the production is really, really nice. But you see all that production, and at least for me, I just instantly think, okay, big production, it's going to be very fiddly. Even going in knowing that it comes from Quo Vadis, even though knowing it comes from Knizia, I still have that innate reaction that like this is going to be a fiddly game, a hard to understand the rules game. And then you read the rules and you realize like this is a Knizia. There's a little bit more with Zoo Vadis versus Quo Vadis with the asymmetric powers, but it's really not that much. And just a very fun game of negotiation and making promises at the table and cajoling people to do things to aid you with a promise that you'll help them later and all that kind of stuff. So, and it's a relatively short game. So it's kind of that thing that we've talked about searching for, where it's like this is not on the scale of diplomacy, of course, but a negotiation game with a low rule set that is played, in under 90 minutes. So I really enjoyed Zoo Vadis.
Mark's review of Zoo Vadis. I love how short it is. Wow.
That's part of it.
Put that on the side of the box.
Part of it.
I like Vadis a lot. It's somewhere hovering below my top 50. And part of that is a little bit before, because of like, while I love the idea of it, I've definitely had games of it that just haven't worked. And like, that's very player dependent. Obviously, it's negotiation. There are plenty of people whom I know that this is just not going to be their cup of tea. But I think it's also a really good example of how you take a really solid idea that just didn't live up to its potential in Quo Vadis. And like, Bitewing has done a really good job of really just turning that into a product. I think that really is obviously speaking to a lot of people. So like, yeah, I think it's great.
I think this is overrated now, actually, as a game. I
Really?
like the game. I just don't. I can't.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
I can get that. I get that. I sort of have a little bit of feeling like the whole, I don't know, it feels like very Rudy to me in some ways, where it's like, this is a game that doesn't feel like it's necessarily something like a lot of people would necessarily like, and yet it's become like
So beloved.
very, very widely loved. Yeah.
Rudy Tooty, as we
there's
describe it. Like arcs.
Feels like a disconnect. All right. On to number 46, another new to the list game, and one that we've all played fairly recently, one that I actually just played last night. This is Wilmot's Warehouse.
Nice.
A memory game that, again, if you had told me that I'd be into a memory game, I would have thought that you were crazy, and yet here it is on my top 50 games of all time list at number 46. I actually just played this 2 players with Roselle last night, and while it was a much more difficult experience with just 2 players trying to remember everything, it was still a lot of laughs, and we had a lot of fun, and just a great experience.
I feel like this is the perfect game of where it's like someone, you know how they talk about improv as just saying like yes and kind of thing? It's like a gamified version of that where you're like, well, there's a guy here, you know, like we had one where there was 2 hands holding kind of on a card, and so there was a story about this guy over here and that guy over there who liked ramen, and then the ramen coming from the sky, and then people are just like, they just make up stupid where they just sort of say yes and in a really structured way that allows people to almost get into the improv spirit of what you're doing more than the game itself. And I think it's really, really successful at that. I bought it like immediately after we played it.
This is also great. This is a good surprise hit for this year for me as well.
You got this to play with people at work, Kellen?
I still have not done that yet, but
Okay.
I will. It will be very challenging for me, though, because making really offensive jokes out of these things is also key to liking the game.
You don't
Right.
have to do that. You don't have to make offensive jokes.
What are you talking, Neilan? Yeah, it's like a trust circle where everyone looks up at each other and like, oh, we're keeping this all in the circle. It's in the warehouse together. What do you mean? I'm a provocateur.
Okay, my number 45 is down 10 spots. This is Tycoon India 1981. Got a chance to preview this for a Kickstarter a while back, and we get approached for Kickstarters fairly regularly, and for the most part, I think those tend to be lackluster experiences, and so didn't know anything about Tycoon India when I got a chance to play it before it came out, and was really, really taken by it. I got a chance to play it again earlier in the year, and again, really enjoyed it. In a lot of ways, this is a standard economic game with a little bit of a Euro trapping sort of thing. But the thing that really gets me about it is the Knizia-esque sort of win condition where there are 2 sort of main paths to victory, but if you're not going to win both of them, then you must win this tiebreaker 3rd path. And so there comes a time in the game where you are starting to see what you've achieved well in and look at what your opponents are doing and then realize, okay, I'm not going to be able to win the 2 main paths to victory, and therefore now I need to pivot and make sure that I'm getting this tie-breaking win condition. And the way they all sort of interlock is really interesting. And I think one issue nowadays with like Euro games or modern games is the whole min-max thing where like, you know, you find a path and you know you need to really like go down the path hard and you need to be as efficient as possible. And often I find a lot of games don't allow you to pivot midway through. And I find the pivoting choice in this game where when you realize you need to pivot or you might need to pivot to be really well done. And like, it feels like you're able to like see the situation on the table and actually like really change things. And so again, so often you just feel like efficiency. I need to like hammer this as hard as possible. And the idea that this potential need to shift is built in. It just makes it feel very satisfying whenever I've played it. So I don't think you guys have a chance to play this either. Maybe we should have played it when you were here for Barrage Con, but I still think this is one of the better economic / Euro games out there. So that's Tycoon India 1981.
Yeah, I remember being intrigued by your description of it on the mainline episode, but yeah, have not had a chance to play it, unfortunately.
What's the length, Mark?
Probably 90 minutes, give or take.
That's not bad. It
Something
sounded
like
like you were describing like a 4-hour like rollout.
Oh yeah, no, thankfully not. So yeah, I would say this is one of those diamonds in the rough that I don't think many people have played or heard about, and I would encourage you to take a look at it. Next up is new to the list, but I think it's been on my list before. This is, I think, a Kellen favorite. I got a chance to play it again this year. Dogs of War. This is a big Kellen game, right?
Yeah, it is. What number is this? You didn't say.
Oh, sorry. This is number 44, Dogs of War.
Paolo Mori.
44 Dogs of War.
You love the hats, the cool mini or not hats?
The hats, yeah, the hats are big. Hats make the game. No, I don't really care about the hats. The hats are kind of dumb, to be honest. Aren't they doing? Well, I guess they always talk about doing a reprint.
They are.
No, that's happening. Yeah, Shut Up and Sit Down
or
have their new line that is going to be bringing back Dogs of War.
Oh, I did not realize. Okay, very cool. Hat centric.
No, they're going with anthropomorphic dogs. No, the cover is out and there's anthropomorphic dogs on it, Mark. We can't get behind this. Like, we love Shut Up and Sit Down, but we have to go for sculpted
Draw the
hats.
line somewhere.
Yeah, like, this could be our stance, you know what I mean? A boycott, you could say.
Yeah.
Anthropomorphic?
Sounds good.
You know what I mean? My mom made me see Mufasa over Christmas break.
That reinforced the lack of anthropomorphic stuff in your life. But so for those who don't know, Dogs of War is like a tug-of-war sort of game with factions that don't belong to any players, but you sort of gain influence in different factions as the game goes through, and you are trying to, again, this is sort of like what I was talking about with India 1981, where you're shifting throughout the course of the game, and when you get influence with a particular faction, you're trying to back them to have them bump up their victory points, so you'll multiply your influence by their victory points, and so you won't know what anybody else at the table is necessarily what factions are backing, but you'll get a sense of it, and you try to combine forces and negotiate. Again, another game that has features negotiation and feels unlike other games on the market, and yet does all this in like a relatively short time span. So Dogs of War is my number 44 game.
This would be a good one for Euro gamers where you want to trick them into playing something more combative, where there is sort of the efficiency of where am I placing my hat, but then you sort of drag them kicking and screaming into the actual conflict. So it's a good bait and switch for sure.
Number 43, speaking of Euro-esque games, this is Dune Imperium. Now, I haven't played the new version.
Uprising,
yeah. I have not played Uprising yet, but I have played Dune Imperium with the expansions, and I should caveat this with saying that I think that Dune Imperium Vanilla would probably not be on my top 50 list, but I did like what the expansions brought on. They made the card rows and the deck construction a little more dynamic, and the new work placement spots I thought were more interesting. This is sort of a Clank-esque deck builder plus.
Clank-esque? How
well, the idea of
dare you? Frank Herbert is rolling in his grave. Clank-esque?
Insofar as it's a deck builder plus, but instead of having the sort of race aspect with Clank, it's got a
Vaccarino and I are
more
canceling you.
It's got a more, I would say, which is what I like about it. It is a Euro, like a deck builder plus Euro, but it's got confrontation in it. It's not like wild confrontation. It's still Eurofied where, if you lose battles, you're not devastated, but it does have the battles. And I think the deck construction, I think the worker placement spots and all that stuff, I think they're all really well done and just a good combination. You get a lot of these games where it's like kitchen sink, where this is bolted onto that, and I think Dune Imperium does that really, really well. So.
Yeah, I think I agree with that entirely. There was that period of time where a lot of deck builder hybrids, and weirdly a lot of deck builder worker placement hybrids, were coming out, and Dune Imperium felt like the one that nailed that concept the best.
Yeah.
It has all the tension of worker placement. It has everything you want from deck building, feeling like you're actually running through your deck and using the utility of the stuff, the cards you've picked up. And the way that those two systems marriage, where the deck building fuels where you can worker place, it's just smart. It's smart.
I think this game is phenomenal. I almost wish, and to be clear, I'm talking about Uprising because I only rise. I don't know. There's so many jokes with Uprising, Mark, but we're not going to go there because this is a family show. But I actually wish this game had no Dune license on it. I don't know that the game would be better for it, but I think that the game would be properly rewarded for how good it is. I think it's actually like really good. And some of the like it's excellent. They're doing all the too many revisions, too many other things. And it is high, but it's like I think it's really good. Rock solid.
Has your opinion on this changed from playing vanilla Dune Imperium?
Yeah, I think
because I feel you were more lukewarm initially.
Yeah, I think my first few plays, I was just like, it's too long. There's a little bit of in the rewards cards that you get for different things, but Uprising is like the perfect package for me to get some of the expansion elements. I have Uprising behind me on the shelf, and I keep getting rid of games. I'm in permanent get rid of games mode, Mark.
Okay, so that was Dune Imperium, my 43rd favorite game of all time, down actually one spot from last year. Number 42 is another new to the list, although I suspect it's been on my list before, but this is another BGA reinvigoration situation. An
Uprising.
This is an Uprising. This is the Uprising of Decrypto. Decrypto is back on my list. Decrypto is kind of tough because whenever I think of how to teach Decrypto, I always think about Kellen, because Kellen has his we're just going to play it and don't ask me any questions rule, and you'll get it when you start playing it because it's such a hard game to explain. But part of that means that it's sort of hard to get to the table because you have to have at least, I guess, 4 players, although I think it's best at like 6. You want like teams, I think. So I think you want 6, and it's a hard game to teach, and so it's hard to get on the table, which is sort of surprising from a word game. Usually you feel like word games are real simple to get on the table. Decrypto, if you have people who haven't played it, it's sort of hard to get on the table. So getting a chance to play it on BGA this year has allowed me to play it more and enjoy it more, and so it's back on the list. It's back on the list at number 42.
And you might think that it would be a weird game for BGA, but it does a really smart thing where it has you like confirm and your team like double confirm like your guesses, and I think the way that's really smart for async. I was reminded recently of how much I love Decrypto in kind of a roundabout way, where Kellen and I played Crosstalk a couple of weeks back, and we both kind of had that look and discussion. We're like, yeah, this is good, but Decrypto is better. And I forgot it. It's been a long time since I played Decrypto.
I bought a new version of Decrypto that is the same as old Decrypto in a black box with new clue cards. Do you think I've gone through all the clue cards in the first box? Absolutely, I have not. But now I have black box Decrypto, which makes me feel pretty cool.
All right. Number 41 for me is another BGA game. This is a game that I probably would never have played if not for BGA. This is a sort of a second edition. The game originally was known as Amalfi, and that was out in 2020. Amalfi Renaissance is the new version, and that came out, I guess, a couple of years ago. This is on BGA. This is a game that I can't remember why I first played it. I think maybe it come out on BGA, and one of our listeners on the Discord said, was looking for players on our digital tabletop channel, and I decided to join it because it looked interesting. And at first, I wasn't a big fan really at all. For those who aren't familiar with this, you start by choosing a family that takes place in like Italy in the Renaissance or whatever, and you select a family of cards, and that will sort of point you in the direction of how you're going to play your game. And in general, I don't like games where a lot of the game is on the cards, because I feel like people have the head down and are just focused on their own thing, and you're sort of lost as to what other people are doing. But there's a shared board here, and there's other things that you're doing where you're competing with people over worker placement spots, and there are different kinds of worker placement spots. There's like sort of like a one section where you're acquiring private worker placement spots. The resource management aspect of the game is very interesting, where if you want to gather resources, you send a ship somewhere, and that will activate your ability to convert other ships into resources, and then when you use the resources, the ships become available again. It's hard to describe, but it takes a lot of things that you've seen before in terms of like worker placement and stuff like that, but adds a few really interesting twists on it and makes it feel fresh. But I think the thing I like sort of the most about it is that it's a game where, and this may be like unappealing to a lot of people, but it's a game where you can really squeeze out a lot of points, or you can, if you're willing to invest a little bit of time studying the board position and studying what you have and studying what's available, it really feels to me like a game where you can like maybe see one path or see one way of scoring and then realize, well, if I do this and this instead, this opens up a whole new way of scoring, or like a whole new like vein of points that I didn't realize was there initially. So it really encourages looking at different ways of scoring, potential ways of scoring, and realizing that if you tweak things here and there, it might unlock ways of doing better than you thought were there. So it feels like an intricate puzzle that actually rewards you for taking a little bit of time and considering what your move should be. And again, maybe because I've played this primarily on BGA, I played it once in person and it was fine, but BGA async maybe lends itself to this sort of play. But I just find it rewarding where, instead of a thing that I've seen in a lot of Euro games, finding a way to play and hammer it, efficiency. This rewards thinking maybe outside of what you were planning on doing and then realizing, oh, this actually is a good way to go. And so it keeps me on my toes, which I really enjoy. And so that is Amalfi Renaissance, my 41st favorite game of all time. And that's also new to the list. Number 40 is up 5 spots. This is German Railways. Also, at one point, I guess originally known as Prussian Rails. But for those who don't know, this is a cube rails game in the sort of vein of Iberian Gauge and Irish Gauge and all those games, where it has the track building that I like from those kind of games and the simplicity of those kind of games. It's not like an 18XX where there's a whole economic system built in, or the economic systems of these games tend to be pretty straightforward. But what makes German Railways interesting to me is that it is a cube rail game with very asymmetric powers for each of the different train companies, which is something I had never experienced before, and sort of makes for a very interesting situation. The draw for a lot of these cube rail games is, again, the simplicity, the like streamlined economic nature of it, with that whole like Go-esque or Through the Desert-esque like route building and cutting off your opponents. You have that in this game as well, but it has that wild spin of, but each of the train companies is going to have a crazy asymmetric power. Not crazy Marco Polo crazy, but relatively crazy for a cube rail game. And so just a big dose of like freshness for a game that came out 2008, so it's been around for a while, but the most unique cube rail game that I'd ever played. And that is, again, German Railways. So if you are at all a fan of the cube rail set of games, I would suggest giving German Railways a try because it's so different.
Is this your favorite cube rails game? You don't have to tell us what's better, but I'm just curious.
There's one that's definitely higher, but this is right up there. This is, I've played now maybe a dozen cube rail games, and this is in my top 3 for sure.
I just fell down the rabbit hole of having like Iberian and like 2 other ones, and I'm like, I think I need and Chicago Express, which is a cube rails game, right? And I'm just like, I think I need like 1 or 2. I think I need 1, and then what is the party game one where you basically are? I'm trying to look at it. Northern Pacific. That's not a cube rails game, but it's like a trainy stupid game. So I think I need 1 cube rails game in Northern Pacific. And otherwise, I fear Christina would leave me for fear I was the train guy. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I would think maybe like you have 1 Irish Gauge, 1 standard down the middle, or Chicago Express, and then you have Northern Pacific, and then you have German Railways whenever you're trying to feel like spicy, whenever you want to like get crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
think that's important.
We get crazy in other ways, but I guess whatever gets you going more.
Right.
But that sort of uprising.
This feels like something I should try with the asymmetric powers is something that sounds very, very interesting to me. I think Cube Rails is probably the closest I'm ever going to get to like real like train game appreciation. Like I do really like Age of Steam and would love to play that again, but I feel like this is just much closer to my preferred end of the complexity spectrum for a train game.
Yeah, German Railways is certainly closer to like Chicago Express, Irish Gauge in terms of like Age of Steam is great, but it's like much more
for sure.
serious, quote unquote serious, and like, brain burny. Okay, number 39 is a game that we played at BarageCon. It was not the first time I played it, but it was the first time I played it in a long time. Actually, the first time I played it was with you guys at Dice Tower West, I think earlier this year. Vale of Eternity.
Higher than I expected.
Yeah, and another game that was aided by its appearance on BGA. I'm very torn, honestly, on BGA because while it may not sound that way by how effusive I am in praising games that are on that, but whenever a game is on BGA, I just feel less compelled to play it in person because I feel like, why am I playing it in person when I can just play it on BGA? And I have limited in-person time, and I'm going to use it on games that are not available in other formats. So I don't like that about BGA, but I can't help but admit that like it does allow me to play games, the same game more often and sort of see more of it than I otherwise would. And while I don't think BGA has like helped Vale of Eternity as much as other games like Marco Polo and other stuff, it has been nice to play a game that plays pretty quickly on BGA. But BGA aside, Vale of Eternity is a game that I liked the first time we played it back when it was first coming out at Dice Tower West. But I enjoyed it way more when we played it at BarageCon, which is what got me to playing it on BGA. And what it is like just like a really, really tight, almost like Innovation-esque game where like you need to find a combo quick and like try to like hammer it as hard as you can as quickly. It's not as wild as Innovation is, but like I just like that like it's only 10 rounds at most. It usually will end before 10 rounds, and it's like you need to figure out what your combo is going to be quick, because if you don't, like if you're in round 3 or 4 and you haven't found some avenue, like it may not even be an avenue that you've currently started scoring in, but like sometimes you can win by hitting big late, like setting like a big engine up late, but you have to like figure out another Kellenism, like sort of build that plane as you're flying. Like you have to like get things going as the game is like progressing quickly or you're done. And thankfully, again, it's a relatively short game, so if you don't do well, you're not going to be there for very long. But I like the pressure and how it makes you like think on your feet. You've got to cobble something together or you're done. So a game that I've enjoyed way more than I expected. That's number 39, Vale of Eternity, new to my list.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear how much you've liked it. Have you played the expansion much? Is that on BGA?
I have not played the expansion.
Yeah.
I have not played the expansion at all. I didn't even know the expansion was on BGA. So
I don't know if it
I don't think it is.
I never go.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
I never go on BGA. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But don't invoke Innovation unless I tell you can. But
I had a similar experience where, like, after that first game, I remember thinking, I like this, but it kind of didn't sit in my brain at all. But then coming back to it on BGA, and again, it kind of the same thing you said, at BarageCon, then encouraged me to, like, want to just play it a lot more. And yeah, I like Vale of Eternity quite a bit. It's very good.
Super great art, too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's a lovely presentation, like across the board. It doesn't have a whole huge chunk. It's got the occasional extraneous standee that doesn't need to be there, but like it's got lovely card art. Good little components. I like the fact that you're only collecting a small number of the currency pieces, like, and you have to manage that as well. Yeah, some good choices in there.
Number 38 is another new to my list game. This is a game I covered back on episode 307. So listen back to that if you want to hear a full review. But this is Kutná Hora, City of Silver, which is a game when it was first on the hot list, I was not really interested in, despite it being like, everybody said it was like an interesting economic game, which is usually down my alley, but just the box cover was so boring to me. It just has like a big silver coin on it. I was like, this, I don't know, it just is not screaming interesting to me, but got a chance to play it and quickly changed my mind. Again, this is economic game with simultaneous action selection, which is a nice thing to sort of have the game moving a little quicker, which is always nice. But the gimmick that really gets you in this one is the dynamic sort of market that are represented by decks of cards. So you have decks of cards that will adjust based on what is going on in the city that you're building together. So if like more resources are being put into a city, more wood is being put into a city, more wood is being taken out, there's a greater demand, the market will fluctuate in a way that feels dynamic and yet simple to sort of manage. It's not like there's a lot of upkeep. It's just basically you've got a deck of cards and you're just taking cards off of this deck as things change, but does make it, again, feel dynamic. And I like the idea of the simultaneous action selection because, again, keeps the game moving. I mentioned earlier that I don't like games where like the whole game is on the card, where everybody's like reading their own card, and this is like not the case in Kutná Hora. Everybody has the same deck of cards, same hand of cards to start the game, and will end the game with the same hand of cards, so you know what your opponents are capable of doing, and the cards just represent different types of actions, and it's really simple to calculate in your head, like, okay, if I do use this card, I think Eric might be using this card. And it's like you are not sucked out of the shared experience or like the interactivity, because it's really simple to realize what your opponents are capable of. Speaking of interactivity, again, this is a game where you're building a city together with your opponents. So there's the interaction as to like grabbing the best spots in the city, and you can be sort of brutal about where you're building things, and there's interactivity there. So economic, interactive, with enough Euro that it's, it feels comfortable in a lot of ways, and I just think it's a really good, again, I mentioned this earlier with Dune Imperium, the games that feel like this is bolted onto this, but bolted on this. There's a little bit of that in Kutná Hora, but I think, again, done in a really good way.
Kellen stole my copy and then chose never to play it with me.
Neilan, don't tell Mark that. I was looking at it. I still have it. Your copy. I think I hyped this at a Gen Con. I was like, this is the game of the con, even though I hadn't played it. And then here we are. I really want to play this. We could play it on Sunday, bro.
Yeah, actually, that's a great idea. Let's play it.
What do you mean? I'm full of them. Okay. Moving on. Kellen stole it. How dare you?
Moving on, this is down 11 spots, and this is maybe the opposite of the BGA stuff I've been talking about earlier. This game I've sort of burnt out on because of BGA, and I feel myself like less inclined to play it, but still a great game. Classic Hansa Teutonica is my 37th favorite game of all time.
Whisper it, bro. Get in the club.
Oh, this is the secret. That's right. So yes, this is a classic game of route building, and it has the engine building in a really clever way where everybody has the same types of powers that you're all trying to build up, but because the game can end so quickly, you have to really balance like really spending a lot of time building your engine versus like getting your scoring done. And there's a lot of interesting ways to score. You can go for like a long route. You can go for getting in people's way and forcing them to use your buildings, a lot of different things like that. Classic game. If you're listening to the show, you probably have heard us talking about it ad nauseum. Really still like it a lot. I think what I really, really, really need to do is play different maps. I think, Neilan, you've mentioned that you've enjoyed playing the other maps. I've never played anything aside from the standard map, so that's probably what it will take for me to boost it back up. Still a game I like, but I just played it so much now that, unlike other games I've played a lot and still am eager to play, Hansa Teutonica, I feel like I've kind of worn out a little bit, but yeah, maybe a map is what I need.
I'm sure purists would probably tell you that there's nothing better than the standard map, honestly, but I think it's one of my biggest problems that I was running into with Hansa Teutonica was the same thing exactly, of kind of like there's almost like, there are scripted quote-unquote openings. There are standard ways to play the first few moves of Hansa Teutonica, and those new maps just shake that up enough that you're just a little bit thrown off kilter by it, and no one quite knows what to do, to the extent that just makes it feel a little bit more like you're engaging with the game in a more reactionary way, which I liked.
Oh, you mentioned that hardcore players will think that the vanilla map is like the way to go. Is that the consensus?
No, to be honest, that's entirely my own supposition. Yeah. I don't know.
Guessing,
that's a thing. But like that would make sense to me, I think, especially given... Yeah. I feel like anytime I've ever seen an online implementation of it, it's only the standard map. So, that would make sense to me.
Okay. My 36th favorite game of all time is going to be very similar to my 35th favorite game of all time in terms of dropping because I haven't played them in a while, but this is again the aspirational bucket that I mentioned earlier with Cthulhu Wars. This is Cuba Libre. I can't remember if I played it this year with Casey on the Brain and Jar Twitch. It probably was last year, but when I played it with her, I hadn't played it in a while, and I started, when you haven't played a game in a while, you wonder if it's going to hold up, and it held up really, really well that time, and yet I still don't play it super often, and so it's dropping. I think what I'm going to need to do here is just like play a different coin game. I'm excited to play People Power, which is another 3-player coin game in the sort of vein of Cuba Libre, but instead of the Cuban Revolution, this is about the Philippines in the mid 80s. I love games that lean heavily into historical things, historical periods, and so that fills the void for me. And so I think what it's going to take is again just playing a different version. But representation for this type of game is important on my list because I generally do love diving into these games. Like they offer me something that is like more than just a game, like really being able to sink my teeth into another passion of mine, which is history. So this is like more than just that game. But yeah, so the historical coin game, Cuba Libre, is 36 down 5 spots. It might drop, but I'm hoping it's replaced by another historical coin game maybe in the future.
I think more so than any game you've had on your list consistently over the years, Mark, this is the one that I kind of feel the most like I need to try, just given how much you've praised it over the years. Yeah, it seems silly that we've not got a chance to play it together yet.
Because we have root, Neilan. We don't need history.
And the thing that's sort of like, I worry about recommending this game to people who, maybe are not into historical games, but I take some comfort in the fact that I think there's a lot of board game reviewers out there whose opinions I respect, including Casey, of course, who maybe are otherwise not like massive history folk or, like are interested in history to varying degrees. And yet there seems to be a consistent love for Cuba Libre. So it makes me feel like, okay, I'm not like out on a limb here suggesting this. So number 35 is going to be very similar to Cuba Libre in that it's another faller, and a faller because I have not played it in a while. And I suspect that this is probably going to be falling off my list if I don't get it played this year. This used to be a top 10 game, but it's hard to get 18xx games out there. So 1830, Railways and Robber Barons is now down to 35, down 6 spots. Have not played it probably since our last year's lists. I have a feeling that this, like Cuba Libre, might be replaced by another game in the same family. I'm hearing a lot of good things about 18 Chesapeake, which is a game I have that I know people who I've played games with around here have played and have enjoyed, whereas like they don't play 18xx games, but they have played Chesapeake. And so that makes me feel like I could get it tabled, and it's supposed to be an 18xx experience that is more streamlined or quicker, somehow like less cumbersome. And so maybe that's the path to go to as I find myself sort of like in general moving away from super, super long games. But 18xx games offer something that other games just don't. Like if you want a really deep economic experience, and again, it's not only the economics part of it that I love route building and cutting people off, and the whole, again, through the desert go thing where you want to get somewhere and there's that tempo concern, like if I start building this way, I need to get there to cut Neilan off, because if he cuts me off, then I'm not gonna be able to get to that spot. And so it's like almost like that, I don't know if you would call that the Euro side of it, but like the more standard board game route building thing is just like aspect of board games I love when games offer that. And having that with like a heavy economic model makes for a game that, aside from the difficulty to play in terms of length, is right up my alley. So 1830, down 6 spots from last year. Again, probably dropping, hopefully to be replaced by something in the same family.
Is this the highest 18xx game on your list?
It is. Yeah, it is the only 18xx game on my list now, just because, again, the difficulty to get them tabled. But yeah,
I think it's
something I miss playing more
on it anymore, because we kept saying we were going to play one, and then we kept saying we were going to play one.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel a little like silenced.
Right. Maybe we should aim for Chesapeake. I think that'll be not as cumbersome to get out there.
No, what about Japan, bro? 1889.
Oh, yeah, 1889.
Think about Japan.
Yeah.
You forgot about Japan.
That's a good point. No, that's true. You got me there. I'm humbled. Number 34, down 10 spots. This is also a BGA game. This is probably more along the lines of Hansa Teutonica in terms of like, I went from liking this game to playing it on BGA and loving it, and now I'm a little burnt out on it, but I still think it's a fantastic game. This is La Granja, or La Granja, whatever. Multi-use cards, super tight. I think those are the two big things about La Granja. It's like multi-use cards are really interesting. Every card has like 4 different ways you can play it, and on top of that, you can't really play this game if you're going to play it competitively. Like, you can't play it very willy-nilly. Like, it's a game where every single point you can wring out of a situation you want to wring out, because if you find yourself lacking in something, you're probably going to like really be hurting for something. And so it's a very deep puzzle, and the puzzle pieces are these multi-use cards that I just find really interesting, because the multi-use cards are like, they're like standard things where you can use part of it to like increase your income. You can use part of it to like sow your fields. You can use part of it to like as a recipe fulfillment. But then the last part is a power. So there's like sort of like a non-Euro thing there. The rest of the game is very Euro, intricately puzzly. But then there's like, each card can give you power. And yet, even the powers are not super, they're all quite different, but none of them is game breaking. So you're not like, there's no get out of jail free cards. Like, yes, this is going to give me an advantage, but I still have to like fight my way through this. So yeah, a game that feels like very clockwork to me in a way that I love. That is number 34, La Granja.
I need to play this one more. I have it and I've always loved it. I still haven't tried El Burro, but I doubt I would like it anymore, which is sort of like La Granja to Boogaloo.
Right.
We promise this game is an innovation mixed with Castles of Burgundy.
Is that what the selling point has been? I've been a little bit off of.
No, that's just that's how I kind of think. I don't know why
you
I
take
think about it that way, but I kind of do.
Yeah.
In a positive way, I own La Granja.
Yeah.
Definitely pronounced more correctly than you. So I hope you're humbled again.
I am humbled again. I think I pronounced it in 3 different ways just to try to cover my bases.
Oh, yeah.
Explanation.
That's a good idea. But don't tell them.
If you're not going to nail it down, just
Yeah, if you tell
Well,
them.
yeah, I'm going to cut all this out.
Yeah, you can't
Just
tell them.
Copy paste the correct pronunciation onto the rest of them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, number 33, new to the list. Very, very much like Amalfi Renaissance, the game I mentioned earlier, insofar as actually, it's funny, I got this game in a trade early in the year, very early in the year, and then just got it as part of a bigger bundle of games I traded away and got in return, and just got it because it looked interesting, like the reviews were pretty good, but didn't really think much of it, and did not play it for months. And then I think same thing happened as Amalfi Renaissance, where a listener on our Discord in the digital tabletop channel said, hey, does anyone want to play Karvi on BGA? And so I joined it, realized soon thereafter, like, oh, this is the game that I just got, or I got a couple months ago, and played it. And this has probably my favorite mechanism in board games. I mean, I think route building in the way I've mentioned before, where you're like, again, like through the desert sort of games, or Blue Lagoon, that's probably my favorite. But I love time tracks, which is what you see in Nova Luna or Patchwork, Francis Drake, where your options are laid out. You can go as far down as you want to get the juiciest spot, but if you do, you're leaving your opponents the opportunity to pick up a lot of things behind you because your turn doesn't come up until you're farthest back in line. Glenn Moore has the same thing. And so played Karvi without realizing that that's what the game was, and just instantly loved it. It revolves again around this time track. Also has, as I mentioned in talking about Amalfi Renaissance and in talking about La Granja, it's a game where you can sort of play it fast and you can sort of like say, okay, I'm just going to jump here and get this and get that. But I think it really does lend itself to like thinking about your situation and realizing like, oh, well, I've got a combo here where if I actually do this, I thought I needed just to like, grab a rating token or something. But if I actually move a little bit slower, I can get more than I expected. And because you have the time track and, your opponents can, be greedy and jump ahead to something that they really want, you're sort of forced to take advantage of the situation turn by turn. Like there's a spot in front and you need it. Do you just jump there and make sure you get it and sacrifice, your opponent's getting a lot of stuff? Or are you going to gamble that they don't really need it? And so you're going to try to like be greedy in another way and just like pick up a lot of stuff on the way. The high ranking, I have to admit, is also aided by the fact that I've played this game now maybe 7 or 8 times and I absolutely crush in it. Like, I'm not above saying that my performance in games will affect how they are on my top 50 list. And this is probably the most egregious version of that. People now on the digital tabletop have mentioned like me just like destroying them. And it's gotten to a point where I'm just like, I feel bad playing now because I just feel like I'm not going to lose. And so there's that part of it. But it just, I think it's just because I totally am in tune with the way this game is played. Again, time tracks are just a mechanism I love, and I'm just at one with that. So I really, really enjoy Karvi.
It's your sensitivity to time that is making you a ringer here.
That's right. It's my old age that is allowing me to realize the importance of taking your time or jumping ahead when need be. So,
Mark.
Yeah, I know. I very much enjoy it. If you like time tracks, if you like Glenn Moore, Francis Drake, or
if you like time tracks. That's such a nonsensical. What if you like time tracks?
If you like,
do you think anyone has ever contemplated ever in BGG? Okay. Do I like time tracks? What are you even talking about, Mark? Karvi?
Okay. First of all, if somebody told me if you like time tracks, try blank, I would try blank. So it's a very specified suggestion. People say all the time, if you like deck builders, like that, what does that mean? That's even more nebulous than if you like time tracks. Look, if you like time tracks,
this is the first time I've ever heard of a time track. What are we talking about?
Well, you should be listening. You should listen to the Board Game Barrage podcast because I talk about it every once in a while.
All
whenever
right.
Mark
You
talks.
love time tracks. You're old. Karvi. You're a ringer. You beat everybody. Karvi. Your favorite.
I do beat everybody in Karvi.
Yeah.
I crush in Karvi. All right, number 32, down 7 spots. This is a game that is tough to get to the table because I think it's very distasteful to a lot of folks, but I love how weird it is and how brutally economic it is. This is Container. Container is like economic game, although it has some weird twists in it for sure. It just feels like such a bare bones economic game where like you need to like wring out profit in small increments in a very dynamic system as brutally as you can. This is a game where you're not going to be making a lot of money, probably, especially not in the early rounds, and you really need to tailor your economic engine to like what is serving the board, what is serving the other players, and you have to really try to get any advantage, any incremental advantage wherever you want to. And I think that really is, like, a lot of players will find that distasteful and not like a fun experience. I don't think it's necessarily a rollicking good time, but like other games that I'll mention later, it's a game where whenever I've played it, I do feel my heart racing playing it. Even though it is so incremental, it's just like you have to like find your little ledge. It's like you're on a mountain. You have to find like a little finger hold and just hold on to it because you're barely hanging on, and you got to make $1 here or $1 there any way you can because it's just so hard to get ahead in this game. But every once in a while, I want that. I want that like beautiful pain, and that's what I get from Container. I think you guys are mixed to negative on this game.
I would say mixed is right for me. Like, I admire the hell out of Container. I just wish I liked it more. It's just really weird. Like, I can't think of very many games that are both as simple in the rules. Well, not that it's simple, but like relative to like how quickly it can go off the rails. Like it kind of just feels like this feels like it should be more constrained, but it's also just beautiful for how it isn't.
Yeah, very fragile in that way.
Yeah, someone needs to zoo Vadis Container.
Ooh,
yeah, that's true.
Not the animals.
There was
not the animals. Just want to be clear, not the animals.
And I actually do think that it is two twists away from being a game I would really love in that same way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
there was like a jumbo version that came out that had a couple minor rules tweaks, but I don't think that's what you're sort of referring to. That was more of like a cosmetic thing. All right, and finally for this episode, my 31st favorite game of all time is up 5 spots because I thankfully got a chance to play it again after a relatively long absence. Dungeon Fighter. Just a silly, well, look, not silly. I have a tendency to like think of fun dexterity games as silly, but there's definitely more Dungeon Fighter than just like silliness.
I mean, I think in the world of dexterity games, it's pretty silly.
You think so?
Yeah, you're throwing dice between your legs.
That's true. That's true. That is certainly like almost the definition of silly. But it is like a dungeon crawl, and I generally don't go for dungeon crawl. Like speaking of time tracks, if somebody says if you like dungeon crawlers, try X, I would probably not try X. However, I love Dungeon Fighter. It is a dungeon crawler in a way that I sort of think of as a prototypical dungeon crawler, insofar as you are going through a dungeon and you're buying weapons and stuff like that. But the twist is, the thing that makes Dungeon Fighter so great is that the way you're fighting your enemies is by throwing dice at a bullseye that's on the table, and the dice must bounce before hitting the bullseye. So it's like you can't just throw it on the target pad. And as Neilan has sort of alluded to, in these weapons that you're picking up, the way that the weapons work is like you have to throw your dice in weird ways, like from under the table, or using another person's hand to throw the dice, or a bunch of different things, throwing them off your nose, all these weird ways. And so yeah, it's just crazy fun. I've said this in the past. I had some of my most exhilarating single moments in board gaming from Dungeon Fighter. I've mentioned the story before, but I just say it one more time. I was playing Dungeon Fighter with a hardcore board game friend of mine, Andreas, who I've mentioned in the past, and then a person who was with us who's not really much of a gamer, but was looking to play a game. And we were fighting the main boss, last guy in the game. It was a thing where we're doing well early, and it was just getting brutal, and we're down, and now we're fighting the last person. Andreas and I are dead. It's up to her, and not only is it up to her to win it, she has to hit a bullseye on the last throw. And it was a situation where we're cheering for her, but nobody at the table thinks that she can do it, because we've had maybe like 2 bullseyes the entire game, and those are just happenstance. They just happen to be bullseyes. This is like a bullseye, and you've got to get it right now. And she throws it. She gets the bullseye. We win the game. We all cheer, like spontaneous cheer. Like, we were all hyped up, but like the cheer that we all let out was a visceral, like didn't expect it to happen thing. And just was one of my favorite moments of board gaming. And that's not like a crazy one-off in Dungeon Fighter. Like you will get those moments in Dungeon Fighter every time you play. There may not be like those heights, but you'll get heights in it, and you'll have laughs because of the silliness of it. And yeah, just Dungeon Fighter. If you're looking for a dexterity game, but with like a real game there too, Dungeon Fighter is hard to beat for sure.
I haven't played in this in a very long time. I was very tempted because I know they did a series of reprints recently that were going on crowdfunding. Have you played any of those, by the way, Mark?
I have not. I got one of them, but I have not played it yet, and I actually don't even know how it's changed. But yeah, I should definitely crack one of those open.
I know that a lot of it was just kind of like parceling it up into a bunch of different boxes and adding unique mechanics to each box, is my understanding. But there was something about that was appealing, not that specific way, but like the reprint of it that was appealing to like be tempted to pick it up again. I just didn't go for it in the end, but I kind of regret it because like I did enjoy those games of Dungeon Fighter. I think I played all of them with you like years and years ago.
Yeah, I just don't know how you wouldn't enjoy playing Dungeon. Like, you're always gonna have a good time playing Dungeon Fighter. Unlike Container, whereas I can see people not liking Container, I don't know who doesn't like Dungeon Fighter. So that will do it for my first installment of my top 50 games of all time, games 50 to 31. Looking forward to next week when Neilan shows up with his top 50 games from 50 to 31.
It's going to be crazy.
And it's going to get nuts. It is going to be, you thought my list was fantastic. Just wait until you hear Neilan's. But that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks again to Heart Society for our intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid. If you have any comments, I would love to see them. Go to our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Let me know what you think. Let me know where you think I got it wrong, where I got it right. Always like hearing feedback on that. Thank you so much for listening. Until next week, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.